In past interviews, you've spoken about Israel's addiction to the occupation, is one way you phrased it, and about how it benefits economically and politically from this. What do you mean specifically by that?
I think that Israel, Grace, can we? Because I think that Israel, I'm not sure that Israel is gaining much out of the occupation. Mm-hmm. Exactly like drug addict, he doesn't gain much out of it. I never claimed that Israel gains out of it. That's exactly the point, that Israel is paying a hell of a price for the occupation. But being addicted, you don't give yourself any report about what you are doing and why you are doing so. And therefore it is an addiction, and therefore it's very dangerous.
You've been criticized by some Israeli commentators in the past. In this case, I'm specifically thinking of Marev, for being insensitive to the struggles of Israelis in the midst of a war, as well as being a propagandist for Hamas, I believe is the way they phrased it. How would you respond to these sorts of claims?
This is ridiculous. I'm not a propagandist for anyone. I'm trying to say my words against the Israeli propaganda. If there is a propaganda, it is the Israeli official attitude, and for so long time. I'm trying to raise an alternative voice. I'm trying to say my truth. You might accept it, you might not accept it, but this is my truth. I have nothing to do with Hamas. In my view, I'm a genuine Israeli patriot who cares about the future of my country, who wants to feel that I'm living in a just society, which I don't, who wants to be proud of being an Israeli, which I don't.
So that leads into a nice segue into our next question. You opined for the lack of ideological diversity in the Israeli political scene currently, specifically the collapse of the left. Do you see this changing anytime in the near future, or do you believe it's more or less entrenched now?
I'm very skeptical. I think the Israeli society is in condition of coma, total blindness, total indifference, total apathy. No moral questions are being raised anymore at all, no doubts. And to get out of this situation is very hard. I don't say it's impossible, but you need really a very, very serious wake-up call to wake the society up. Until now, I don't see it happening.
A few months ago, we had Ali Boumina from Electronic Intifada came to Ubyssey, and he's a very strong proponent of the one-state solution, and he made that case. What are your thoughts on the one-state solution?
I would easily support it if I would have been sure that it's not going to become an apartheid state. I would easily support it if it wouldn't be so much bad blood between the two societies, the two communities, the Israeli one and the Palestinian one. I would totally support it if I would have been convinced that it's going to be a real democracy with equality and justice. I have my doubts that this can work right now. On the other hand, the two-state solution seemed to be too late in any case. So it's really a junction that I don't know where we are going to from here on.
Why is it that you believe a two-state solution is too late at this point?
Because we face between 300 to 500,000 settlers, and I don't see any Israeli leadership evacuating them. And without evacuating them, there is no just solution. And without just solution, there is no solution which will last.
One of the things I've always found fascinating about Israel is the fact that a fifth of all Israeli citizens are Israeli Arabs. What do you see their role being, both in the current state and in a potential two-state solution if that were to occur?
They could have been a bridge, but unfortunately Israel is pushing them to the corner through deep, deep discrimination. I don't want to get into details, but they are highly discriminated, and they are being pushed into the corner. And they also begin to ask all kinds of questions about their rights. And the young generation starts to be ready to go for struggle for their rights. So I think that on one hand they could be an example of a real coexistence, of really living together, of really justice and equal rights. Unfortunately, they are exactly the opposite. Not they, but the treatment they get from the state is exactly the opposite. It's exactly the example for the opposite direction, which just make me more skeptical about the one-state solution. If Israel is treating its own citizens like this, with such a discrimination, why would we expect that the one-state solution would be any different?
Israeli and Palestinian affairs are always a very contentious issue, especially at university campuses across North America, infinitely more so than just about any other conflict. Why do you think that is, and do you believe that that's a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a very good question, if I may say so, because there are atrocities and crimes of war being done all over the world, and many of them are much worse than what Israel is doing. And still Israel is in the focus. It has many reasons, religious reasons, historical reasons. But above all, Israel claims to belong to the Western world, to the democratic world. Israel gains a lot out of this belonging to the so-called Western and free world. This has also a price. And the price is that because Israel is one of the family of the so-called civilized world, also the demands from Israel are different than from any other state. And I see it in a very good way. I don't want to become a citizen of a country like Sudan or Rwanda or the Balkans, where there was, or Iran, where there is hardly democracy, and in many times the world ignores violations of human rights. I want to belong to a place which belongs really to the civilized world, to the modern one, to the liberal one, to the open-minded one, and to the democratic one. And for this, the eyes of the world concentrating on Israel can help Israel to get out of its own way, which is a very wrong one in my view.
You've strongly advocated for Hamas to be at the table for any sort of talks going forward. What would you tell to some people that consider speaking to a group like Hamas, that in most Western countries is listed as a terrorist group, to be essentially appalling or undoable?
First of all the liberation movements were listed as terrorist groups, including the Zionistic organizations. Secondly, the PLO was also listed once as terror group, and today Mahmoud Abbas is a welcome guest in any Western capital, and the world is hugging Abbas. His organization was listed also as a terrorist organization. The terror is the weapon of the weak one. And the terror is a tool, a very cruel one, most of the times not legitimate one. But that's the tool of the desperate one to get freedom. Hamas is not my cup of tea. Not because of being terroristic or not, but because of being religious and fundamentalistic. An organization who doesn't acknowledge women's rights, for example, cannot be favorable to me. But Hamas was elected in a democratic way, in free elections. And Hamas is today a full partner in the Palestinian society or in the Palestinian leadership. And we can't ignore Hamas. I'm not sure that Hamas will come to the negotiation table. But I think we should challenge them. I think we should do any possible effort to try to bring them in, because otherwise we are dealing with the representatives of half the Palestinian people over half the Palestinian territory, because Gaza is also excluded. It's not only about Hamas. Look at those peace talks. Nobody mentions Gaza anymore. This by itself is a main obstacle to reach a real comprehensive peace.
In one of your last columns, you argue that comparisons between the Israeli occupation and Nazism and the Holocaust are completely unfounded. Do you believe that these sorts of comparisons poison the dialogue on the subject?
First of all, those comparisons are not on a factual ground. It is very, very easy to prove that there is nothing to compare between what Israel is doing to what the Nazis did. Secondly, I think also it's very counterproductive for my own camp, who fights against occupation, because it is so easy to prove that it's not on a factual ground, that there is no comparison. Then the outcome will be, okay, so the Israeli occupation is human, is liberal, everything is fine because it's not Nazi, so it's fine. So it's also counterproductive from this point of view. Therefore, I always say, let's not exaggerate. The situation is terrible enough. The occupation is brutal enough. Let's not exaggerate. Let's not compare it to what it is not being compared. There are no extermination camps. There is no systematic plan to exterminate the Palestinian people. And let's stick to the facts, which are enough terrible.
One last question.
Sure.
What should Canada's role be with regards to the situation in Israel and Palestine?
Canada, first of all, should stop being a blind and automatic supporter of Israel and of the Israeli occupation. A country that stands for human rights and international law cannot support the Israeli occupation. And this is not friendship. Blind and automatic friendship is not a friendship. Canada should raise its voice against the Israeli occupation. You can still be a genuine friend and raise a critical voice. And Canada, as a state which has some reputation for fighting for human rights in the world and fighting for keeping the international law, should have raised her voice against this part of Israel, which is violating the international law, which is violating basic human rights of 3.5 million Palestinians. And it's very disappointing that in Canada, or at least the official position of Canada, is such a blind support to the occupation.
Thank you very much.